Okay, perfect. So I went ahead and started recording. So thank you everyone who made it to the call today. Today I'm going to talk about recruiting mostly, and we're going to go through some things that I have learned by talking to our end user licensees about what can help them and issues that I see as they set up campaigns so that you can better interact with the RegAge recruiting module. At the end of the call, I'm going to walk through some new features that we plan on adding starting in June or July of this year that will take us through the end of the year in recruiting. I'll also talk about just some new features in general that we've added or will be adding to RegAge shortly. And then we will go ahead and have a question and answer session. All right, so some of what I go through today may be a bit of a review for you, but I promise to add some nuggets in as we go so that you can learn more about RegAge and how recruiting works as well as we walk through this. So the first thing that I have up on my screen is I have my recruiting homepage. So when you land on your recruiting homepage, it's going to show you a list of your subjects. There are 10 per page by default. The number of pages you have is down below, and the total number of subjects you have in your database is at the top. Now, if you have someone call you and say, hey, can we do a test with males? You can very easily click on the inverse triangle. You can look for demographics, and you can say, I want to understand how many males we have in our database. So I can type in male. It's going to search through my demographics filter. I click male. I click save. And it's going to filter, and this is going to tell me now how many people exist in my database that are male. I have 1,220 people who exist. And you can add multiple filters here to filter down your database. This is a good way to see if the test that you're planning is even possible within the system. Okay. You can also download subjects. You can email subjects. You can invite users to create a portal account, etc. So this little inverse triangle allows you to search. The ellipses over here allow you to do more things with your database from that ellipses section. Panels. Panels are used to organize people together. It was originally designed to create panels for discrimination or descriptive testing. You can see here, here's descriptive panel performance. It also works for degree of difference panel performance as well. Okay. On subjects, you can actually click on an individual subject and you can look at your interactions with the subject. So if you're looking to find out if someone calls you and says, I haven't been invited to a study for a long time, you can actually go in and you can load their history in the system. So you can say, well, you were actually sent a campaign on such and such a date. You responded to that campaign. So this history allows you to do that. Okay. While the categories allows you to assign new demographics or change a demographic. If someone calls you and needs to update their yogurt brand most often, you can go ahead and do that, and you can submit that to the database and it's updated immediately. Now, this isn't the best use of your time, and I'll show you some different places where you can better update subjects. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on subjects here. I'm going to click on categories. Categories is where you manage the information that you want to store about your individuals. Okay. So for example, I'm storing gender, I'm storing their phone operating system, tablet operating system, hair color, etc. And these are stored as either exclusive categories or non-exclusive categories. A non-exclusive category may be something like ice cream brands eaten in the past year, right? Whereas an exclusive category would be ice cream brand most often. And so I talked just a second ago about how we best update our subject information, and there's a couple of ways to do that. The first step in that, though, is always to make sure that the categories that you create are germane to the business that you're doing. So the first step is always to make sure that you build out these categories. Okay. From there, I'm going to skip a couple steps and I'm going to go down to onboarding. And what onboarding does is onboarding allows you to build a URL where you can then capture new people into your database. So for example, here, if I click on this test campaign, sorry, this test onboarding procedure, you can see I've put in some details. It's an invite only, which means they have to have the URL in order to sign up. And it's required. So they will automatically have to complete this after they log into the portal. Okay. Now, if I click on my edit questionnaire, what we do is we then assign all of the categories that we created in the category step to specific questions. So for example, this says you mentioned you currently own a smartphone. What operating system does your smartphone use? If I look down below, you can see that my smartphone operating system is mapped here. So phone operating system Windows. When the individual clicks on Windows, they will automatically be classified as a Windows user. So if you were to take this URL and post it to your Facebook page, your website, etc., as people fill this out, they'll create a portal account and you'll collect category information that you can then use to pre-screen individuals for your test. You can also create an open onboarding process. And what this does is the first time your subjects hit the database, they will be required to complete this onboarding. This would allow you to collect information about new categories. Let's say you all of a sudden have a client who wants to do coffee testing, or you acquire a company that has a line of coffees. You can then create an open onboarding that would allow you to update information for individuals that already exist in your database and add new category information so that you can then collect coffee information that you can later use to pre-screen individuals for testing. Okay, so this onboarding is really a way to keep your database up to date and to keep your subject information up to date as well. And I'm going to show you another trick to that as well that many people don't know about that exists in the application as well. The last thing I wanted to go through was settings. And I'm going to go ahead and continue without saving here. Settings is where you basically set up all of the information that you want to use for recruiting on a regular basis. So these are your defaults for recruiting. Okay. Now, I recommend that people spend some time in this part of the application, because the more time you spend here, the less time you're going to spend on each subsequent campaign that you use. All right. So the first thing here is consent agreement. So this was added for GDPR regulations in Europe. But basically what it does is it allows you to actively obtain consent from an individual to collect their information and store their information in the system. For US-based clients, it's not required. It's not really required for Europe clients either. We have added the tool to make it easier for you to collect that data. That information is then stored at the subject level, where it says how the person obtained consent. So you can see here under contact, Sammy Adams consented to terms of service, opted to receive calls, and opted to receive emails. And in the history, it then shows how Sammy Adams was contacted. So they consented to the terms of service by talking to Steve Willis on April 1st. They consented to the terms of service, they accepted calls, and they accepted emails. Okay. So this tracks that contact information. Exclusions, this sets default exclusions on a new campaign that you build. So if you want people who haven't participated in 10 days, 30 days, etc. For our CPG clients, many times they leave this blank because they are using existing employees. And so they only have a finite number of people, so they'll leave this blank, which means people can schedule themselves for as many tests as they want to. We do have a minimum call and a minimum email length of 1 hour here for spam purposes. Company contact is your default company contact. Scripts allows you to set default scripts along with smart text that you can use when creating new campaigns. Now, calls aren't very common, but scheduling instructions are used, whether you're calling people or emailing people to schedule them, as our confirmation text, terminate text, qualified texts, and the online confirmation. So again, I suggest taking some time building through this and using the dynamic content here to make this interactive and make it so you have to do as little work as possible when you're setting up a new campaign. Take the time to build it up front and use that for those future campaigns. And you can, of course, do this in any language that is applicable to your account. Session reminders. So session reminders allow you to automatically send reminders to people who are scheduled for a session to come in for their scheduled session time. Again, you can use the smart text here, and you can even set up more than one session reminder email. So if, for example, you're doing employees, I typically recommend that people set one up for 30 minutes or 15 minutes before their session. If you're doing consumers, I typically recommend that you send one 24 hours before, as well as 1 or 2 hours before, so that the consumer remembers to come in for their test. Again, these will automatically show up in a campaign, and you can customize those within the campaign as well. Confirmation emails happen when someone completes a recruiting screener. So for example, if the subject is scheduled, I typically recommend that you set one up and include a calendar event attachment so that a calendar event is automatically put on the subject's calendar, especially if you're using employees. As we know, many employees live and die by their calendars. This puts the calendar event right onto their calendar, and they can easily remember to come to the session. In-call data, I'm just going to skip over. It just tells you what somebody's going to see if you go through a call loop. Adult requirements. When someone signs up for RegAid, this information controls what of the available contact information must be completed or needs to be unique, etc. And you can customize these requirements here. Same with minors. Minors, many times people don't want to collect their names and information. So here you can, for example, just have date of birth and gender. Okay. Subject ranking. We have an algorithm that's built into the system that allows you to control how people show up in recruiting. That being said, not a lot of people use this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Onboarding is the last part of here that I'm going to really talk about. This allow onboarding retake allows someone to retake their onboarding and would allow them to keep that onboarding up to date. So again, another way to keep your subject database up to date here is through this onboarding procedure. Okay, so those are the settings. Again, spend time in settings, set it up so that you don't have to continually change your settings and spend time on each individual campaign. The more time you spend here, the less time you spend on an individual campaign. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump to a project so that you can see how this all works together. And I went ahead and set this up in advance. So I'm just going to edit and walk through the steps real quick here. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to do this at our San Francisco site. We're going to do assisted check-in, which means the person's going to come in and say, hey, I'm Steve Willis. I'm here for my test. I'm going to check them in. Also in self-check-in. So many of you who use employees for testing use self-check-in. What we have done is we have also made not just the code available for people to self-check-in, but the email address now works as a self-check-in. So you do not have to set a custom self-check-in ID. The email address will work for everyone as well. Okay, so there's another option that we've added there. So will you be using RegAid Recruit? You do need to click yes. When you click yes, you get this new fourth step here for recruiting. Now, the only difference for those of you who haven't used recruiting yet is in the scheduling step, right? So participants, we still tell RegAid how many people we want to participate. That's how many people we want to show. In the schedule, it's a little bit different here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the schedule that I set up, and you'll see I set up sessions, right? So what's different if you're not using recruiting, you don't set up sessions, you just block off a period of time. If you are using recruiting, you do set up sessions. And you can see here, seats controls how many people can schedule themselves for any one session, right? Red Jade will be active on your booths for this entire time from 12:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. If someone schedules themselves for the 1 o'clock session but comes at 3:15, it is up to you whether or not you allow them to come in. Red Jade will let them into the test and let them check in regardless of if you're using self check-in or assisted check-in. Okay. All right, so let's get to our actual recruit and walk through some things here that I think will really help people. So let's go ahead and view our campaign. And I'm going to start by going through some details. All right, so a few things in details. One is make this campaign accessible from the subject portal. So what this does is this would allow the person to do a couple of things. One is, if you're using consumers, many times they want to know what tests are upcoming. This will actually make it so that the recruiting campaign will show up in a subject's portal if that person meets the criteria from the details page. So that candidate must be eligible for this campaign. They can click on the link and walk through the screener. Disable scheduling is really used more for focus groups. So for example, if you do an email blast, you may want to disable scheduling followed by a phone call to make sure the person is actually who they say they are, right? Anonymous access is a newer feature. What this does is this creates a static URL link that will allow you to post this recruit to, for example, your Facebook page or to your website, etc. So you can set up your own unique URL here that is only for this test, and it will allow a subject to follow through and recruit themselves anonymously for a test. Okay. You can set your preferred date and time format. The subject exclusion settings pull in from those settings that I was showing you previously. So again, if you spend a little time there, this subject exclusion settings automatically show up. Subject ranking settings, you can then weight the subject ranking settings that I showed you in the settings section. And the custom filters is really where I want to spend a little bit of time here. Okay, so a couple of things. This allows you to include or exclude different filters that we've built. Now, if I click the add filter button, you'll see we actually have a couple of new filters here as well. So we have adults with minor demographics and adults with minors within age range. So this will allow you to filter for information that you have available on adults and minors so that you can look for the right person. For example, I'm looking for someone who is a female who is 35 to 49 with a kid who is between the ages of 8 and 12 in their household, right? So that allows you to do this here. So you can search using these new search features that we've added. Let's go ahead and add a demographic. So I'm going to go ahead and add a demographic. And let's say, for example, I want in my test people who use Android, right? And you'll see this is now 761 people. Between boxes is an and statement. So this person must have Android as their phone or operating system and must be in the San Francisco location. If I place it inside the box, this becomes an or statement. So this would include people who have Android or iOS as their phone operating system. There's 1,489 of those. And have San Francisco as their site. There's 1,167 of those. 770 out of my 2,328 subjects pre-qualify for my test. Okay. So you can change and update these exclusions in here. We do plan on adding this event participation to make it so that you can include or exclude people you can use the and statement within this box. Currently, it's only an or statement, okay? So just know that, and we do plan on updating that. This linked campaigns allows you to link two campaigns together. So in my focus group example, you could link an email recruit followed by a phone recruit, and that allows the demographics to automatically pull through that you collect from the email. Okay, so we submit that, and now we go to our quotas. So you'll see by default, RedJade's going to assume you need a 30% over recruit. If you don't like that number, you can change it just by clicking and changing the total number of people. Now remember, when I was setting up the test, I said I wanted 100 people to show. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a quota branch. So I'm going to go ahead and add gender. Now, when I add gender, this is going to be from my master database. So this is a global demographic that I have that exists. Sorry, I was being a bit impatient with the screen share. Sometimes things run a little slow. So what happens is this is a global demographic. When you have a global demographic, this will pull the information from your database. You can choose to believe your database, or you can put it in the recruiting screener, and I'll explain how that works. So let's go ahead really quickly. Let's change this to 40 to 50 males, and let's change this to 80 to 100 females, and click submit. And you'll see how this is controlled. So what will happen here is RedJade would allow you to recruit all the way up to 50 males. However, it won't allow you to recruit to 100 females. It would stop you at 90 because you need to be able to recruit at least 40 males. So you are controlled by both the mins and the maxes that exist when you create this recruit. Okay. So let's go ahead and add one more thing. I can add a nested quota, so that will nest off of male and female, or I can add a new quota branch. I'm going to go ahead and set a nested quota, and I'm going to add a new test level demographic. And we're going to say something like cookie brand most often. And we're going to say, do they have brand A, or do they have other brands? Right? We want a 50-50 split. So let's go ahead and click submit. Now you'll see what happens is it's going to build a 50-50 split off of females and off of males. So I am automatically creating here a nested demographic that nests off of my gender category. And I'm going to go ahead and click continue to continue this. Now I'm going to quickly build in my screener. So I'm going to go ahead and click create a screener. Something that people don't know exists in RedJade is from the basic questions library, you can add a demographic question. It automatically shows you a list of any quotas that you created on the previous step. You can click it, and it automatically adds the demographic assignment for you. Okay. You can then change this text, which I'm not going to do. Watching me type is slow. All right, let's go ahead and add our other demographic question. And again, I can click, I can do cookie brand most often, but I'm going to change this a bit. One, I'm going to change the order. Two, other brands, I'm going to go ahead and just say this is a require an explanation, but I'm going to add some other responses here, right? So let's go ahead and add brand B and brand C. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my mapping in the demographic assignment. So I'm going to make other brands, instead of being exactly this, I'm going to say includes any of these. And I'm going to change this to brand B and brand C and exclude other brands. I'm going to then add a scenario in termination where I'm going to say, I want to go ahead and I want to terminate people who say other brands. So now what I did was brand A will be classified as brand A in our demographics. Other brands will be a terminate. Brand B and brand C will automatically go to this other brand category I created. All right, I've now created the world's simplest screener. I do want to add one more question here. I'm going to go ahead and add a terminate. For CPG companies, they typically add in some sort of question right off the bat that says, are you available for testing on blank date, right? Nice and easy and upfront. so that they can get out of the survey and be done if they will not qualify, right? And so here in termination scenarios, you can add another scenario, and you can just call this availability. And you can go ahead here, are you available for testing? Includes any of these and no. All right. Now, the other thing that I think that is underutilized is there is a preview option here. Sorry, I didn't mean to click that. I meant to click preview. There is a preview here that you can use. Okay. So there is this preview button that you can use, and it allows you to retake this as many times as you want to so that you can see what happens based on your termination scenarios and based on your mappings so that you can understand if you set this up correctly. So for example, this person passed, their cookie brand most often was other brands, and their male. If you just click start from beginning, you can try it again. Are you available? No. Male, brand A. And we click next. Okay, they were terminated due to availability, but they were assigned these two demographics. Okay, this is a great way to understand if your recruiting screener is set up exactly how you'd like. And the reason that I suggest this is when you're doing termination scenarios, it's kind of the opposite of the way everything else in life works. It's basically backwards. I'm excluding people who say no, etc. Right? So I recommend you spend some time there and really understand how your recruiting screener is going to work, especially the more complicated recruiting screeners that I've seen. All right, I'm going to click finished. And this is going to take me to my summary page where it's going to talk about how many people that I have recruited. So clearly I have nobody recruited for my test yet. I'm going to go ahead and click begin recruiting though. And you'll see a couple of things. One is if I click on candidates, this is going to give me a list of everyone and their status within this recruit. Possible subjects gives me a list of every single person possible. The one that, again, a little underutilized here is this ineligible. We added this because it will allow you to understand why someone is ineligible, right? This person is ineligible because they did not meet the demographic filter that you applied in the details section. So that ineligible filter allows you to better understand why people do not show up in the possible subjects list. If you go in and you find somebody ineligible that should be eligible, you can run a re-rank from your possible subjects category. So from possible subjects, click these little dots and you can re-rank. So this will add new subjects into your test immediately instead of having to wait until the system automatically applies those updates over the next couple of hours. This will run the re-rank typically in 20 to 30 seconds, depending on the size of your database. Okay. The other thing here is let's go ahead and set up an email blast. So from here, I'll go ahead and create an email blast. Now I can create templates, I can copy my last one, or I can create a blank one. So a couple of things that I've noticed is that these usually what you should do is you create one email blast, but what you can do is you can set up different send times. So for example, if I want to send this today, I guess that's yesterday, but that's okay. If you send it in the past, it'll send within 5 to 7 minutes of finishing. The qualify URL is required in order for people to click on the link. The campaign URL, if you only use a campaign URL, that is the anonymous link. Okay, the qualify URL is the individual URL for each person in your database. This will send to 100 unique people. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click submit so this starts sending out emails to recruit people. Also, here, you can look at filters. So this filter does not create a filter that overrides the details filter. This filter will, for example, if you say, hey, I want to send this to males first because I have a tougher time getting males in this test, so I want them to get this email first so that they can pick from all available sessions. That's what the filters here are used for. The detailed filters are used to eliminate people ahead of time or pre-screen your database. Okay. you can always schedule another blast. So instead of going in and creating a new email blast, you can just say, hey, I want to send this to 200 more people because I didn't get enough people. And I'm going to send this on April 26th at 12 p.m. because that will give me enough time to delete it if I'm already done recruiting. Okay, so that's how this all works together. All right, the scripts and screens, again, is going to pull in from those defaults. So that's why you want to spend time on your defaults. Same with session reminders, right? They automatically pull in, as do your confirmation emails, which I haven't created one. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, when they're scheduled, congrats, and I'm going to go ahead and include an email attachment. Okay. So that's what will go out when somebody schedules themselves. All right, so let's show recruiting somebody really quickly. I'm going to click on possible subjects, and I'm going to go ahead and interview them. This would go through the basic call loop. So you'll see it's going to show some information on the side. Not that very many people call, but let's go ahead and do it. We do female. Let's actually say Janet. We had her down as female, but she's actually male, right? So we can click male, and we're going to go ahead and say she has brand A most often. We click next. She's going to qualify, and it's going to show a list of her available sessions. All right. So I go ahead and submit it. She's scheduled for the 2:15 session. And submit. Now I'm going to show you a feature really quickly that I think that is underutilized in Red8. I'm going to go ahead and stop recruiting, and I'm going to go to my summary screen, and let me just refresh this really quickly, and you'll see what happens on this summary screen. I gotta wait a second. On this summary screen, there will be a sync demographics button. This sync demographics button will allow you to update any, there we go. The sync demographics button, I wasn't very patient, will allow you to update any quotas that you've set and allow you to update that information to an existing user. Now you'll see I can make cookie brand most often, which was a test level demographic. I can make this now a global demographic by creating a new category with this information, and I can update gender if I want to. You can decide what demographics to update, but if I go ahead and click submit, and I go back to recruiting, and I go to my home page, and I look for Janet May, you will see that Janet May now has category information. We changed her from female to male, and we also added cookie brand most often, which is brand A here as well. Again, this allows you to keep that database up to date, right? So the more up to date your database is, the better you can use recruiting. All right, so that's going to end the recruiting portion. I'm going to really quickly talk about some new features that we added that hopefully you received an email on. If not, check your spam filters. We added static URL static URL testing, which allows you to create a static URL. So you can post that to Facebook. You can email it to anybody in your database. There is nothing required in order for that person to log into Red8. All they need is the link. They do not need anything else. So that's a new feature that we added that had been requested by a number of people. We have 2 new features coming out in the next week or 2. One of those is test request forms, which will basically allow you to create a new user in Red8, which is called a project requester. That project requester would be able to fill out some information about a test they want to do. Most often this might be an account manager at a testing company or a product developer at a CPG company. But basically they fill out some information, they fill out sample information, what are the goals of the test, what are you trying to do with this test, etc. You get to customize all that information. When they're done, it will send an email to people on their team, and those people can then convert that test request into a project. Pretty cool feature that we're really excited about adding. We're also going to allow you to customize your sample form. So you can make the sample form applicable to the products that you test regularly. So you'll be able to customize that sample form as well. So those are new features coming. After that, we are going to start doing updates to the recruiting module. So for example, we're going to add more location-based default settings. We're going to add compensation tracking. We're going to allow you to set somebody's status. Did they show? Did they no show? Were they late? All of those things that would better allow you to track an individual. So Red Jade Recruiting works great as is. There's a number of people that use it for all of their recruiting needs. We think there's some really cool features that we can add that will make it even better for you. So look for those features coming starting in June or July this year when we plan to do that. We're going to alternate those recruiting updates with analyses updates. So we will be adding more analysis into the application and better customizing it so you can decide what analyses you want to run instead of having Red Jade decide it for you. And again, those updates we have a whole list of updates that are coming in analyses. That'll also include new question types. So things like max diff, conjoint, etc. will be added over the coming months. And that really will take us through the end of the year. We have a lot of new features that we want to add in there as well. Coupled with that, we'll be making some changes to the interface for surveys. So for example, you'll be able to better move pages around, better move questions around, etc. there. So some feedback that we've gotten from our end users there, we'll make some updates there as well. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and I'm going to unmute everybody so that you can go ahead and